There's a lot to get to on the album, but before we go there, I want to ask you a little bit about your evolution to the kind of music you were doing before
Hmm.
and the kind of music you're doing now as Father John Misty. What's shifted for you or what's changed for you as an artist?
Hmm. It's not the easiest thing to articulate, uh, but I mean, I guess the big kind of bellwether um, is the humor,
Right.
you know, or just kind of the spontaneity, or uh, I think more value placed on the seemingly mundane, you
Right.
know. Um, yeah,
Is that a product of getting a bit older or is it a product of
who
maturing as an
knows?
artist or
Yeah, I don't know.
yeah.
Um, I mean, if there's a case to be made that I've become more immature as an artist. But um, yeah, I mean, my main talking point, I guess, in regards to this is that I had this moment of clarity that Jay Tillman had become like an alter ego, you know, and that I guess in my 20s, I didn't. I guess the idea of writing like yourself or writing the way that you actually talk had never occurred to me.
Right.
And in a very singular moment of clarity, it dawned on me to just write the way that I talk and that I think. And I think that that's and to play music that actually kind of gets me off.
Right.
Like it's really as simple as that.
And is too much being made of the Father John Misty as a persona? Like, do you feel like it's not as serious as people make it to be?
It is a thought experiment to me, like obviously a failed one. But to me, I was just interested in really straining. I mean, all the stuff that was going on in my head at the time was that everything about performance is like in some way artifice,
Right.
and so to give myself this like patently stupid name was like. In some ways the most honest thing that I could do for myself, because I think in a lot of my music you hear the conflict on every level,
Right.
whether it is talking about intimacy or talking about writing or talking about talking. There's this kind of constant demented dialectic going on between me and myself. And so I don't know. I'm sure that on some subconscious level is a way to give myself permission to do something
Right.
different, or to I mean, I don't know. It was seriously the last step in the whole thing. I mean, the album was made, everything was cooked, and
So it wasn't like you needed the artifice of a persona in order to
no.
be that emotionally honest.
I mean, I wish it was that easy,
Right.
but I just thought it was this great joke, where it was like, okay, it's just something that I would do, I just think it's hysterical. I think it looks hysterical on a marquee, and that is just for me, believe it or not, that just felt like the most kind of honest representation of myself. But yeah, in terms of significance, it may as well be Barney the dinosaur,
Right. So much of your work, there's a quality or a desire, it seems, for transcendence or liberation, and whether that is, in this album in particular, it's about love as a transforming
Mm.
force. Um,
I'm trapped by my desire for liberation.
right, right.
Yeah.
Well, you also talk about the fact that the truth comes about in your contradictions, right? That
Yeah.
the true self can come about in those contradictions.
Yeah, I mean, the definition of neuroses is an inability to deal with ambivalence,
Right.
I mean, that's why people are so crazy in this time that we live in, because everyone's looking for like empirical evidence, for everything, when everything is chaos, and I mean, especially what I'm doing. I mean, trying to express yourself while trying to run a t-shirt company at the same time. I mean, it's just fraught with contradiction, and you either embrace that and just see the humor in it, and occasionally get some like allotment of enlightenment or something when you're not trying so fucking hard, to find it, or you perish in a morass of inactivity. I mean, I think for a lot of people, like doing nothing is sort of the most authentic thing you can do.
Right. Well, it seems that's something that you talk. I mean, you talk about in your lyrics a lot about having been aimless, about having been wasted time and having been aimless and having drifted.
Where am I doing that?
It's in the lyrics. You talk
Oh
about
yeah, the aimless fake drifter.
The aimless fake drifter.
Yeah, well, that is me, like, the aimless fake drifter and the horny man-child mama's boy. I mean, in that song, I'd written these first three. I'm realizing you didn't just ask me to explain the song, but I'm going to do it
No,
anyway.
explain the song.
But you've got these first three verses that are fairly general sentiments. That kind of anyone can say. Anyone can say, I would never change you, and blah blah blah. But I find have had found since writing those first three verses in my life that nearly everything that makes me who I am is in contradiction with those types of generalities. Right. And so I needed to put something in that song that made it, that put something at risk or like put something at stake for myself. Mm-hmm. And the aimless fake drifter thing is admittedly this like fucking cowboy archetype, whatever, romanticism, that, ramblin' man or whatever. Just it's horrible. It's like gives me the Gene Bulls to even say, but mm-hmm. but that's like part of my weak, it's just this horribly embarrassing weakness that I perceive in myself, like along the lines of, making out with my brother in my dreams, or this man-child mama's boy thing. Like I have all these mommy issues. I'm hung up on the mom thing and all that. And I mean, so yeah, there is a lot of, I guess on the surface, like this aimless drifter thing or whatever, but it's really, that song to perform now is so liberating, and to look my audience in the face and, right. Tell them that,
Well, and I want to dig more deeply into the album in a second. And I should say, because I feel like we kind of got ahead of ourselves a little bit, the album is it's somewhat of an autobiographical album about the experience of falling in love with your now wife, Emma, and sort of the man you were before and the impact of falling in love that it's had on you. In your album bio, you said that your objective, and I'm quoting you here, was to address the sensuality of fear, the terrifying force of love. I know I'm quoting you back at yourself. The unutterable pleasures of true intimacy and the destruction of emotional and intellectual prisons of my own voice. Mm-hmm. So how did you do? Did you feel like you lived up to your own expectations?
Yeah, God only knows what I was thinking when I wrote that. Yeah, I mean, I do. I mean, I think that the, like a song like "Holy Shit" is me waking up from kind of an intellectual dream, and waking up from this idea that everything has to be justified in my life via this, intellectual criteria, and in the past having been so, I don't know how I need to warm up a little. I need to warm my brain up before I try to address that one. But yeah, that song definitely addresses like intellectual prisons for me. Like that smiling and astride me is definitely like the terror, is, the fear, in true intimacy. And I mean, the album cover, I think, is sort of the best illustration of literal illustration of what's happening in the album, because my experience with intimacy was one wherein certain traits that I would rather no one ever see all started to emerge, with this person that, that I was like, I guess, trying to trick into thinking that I was a cool guy for the rest of my life,
Right.
and my jealousy and pettiness and neediness and all of that started to emerge, which was like fairly horrifying for someone. I was like in a narcissist feedback cycle, where just a chain reaction of obliviating myself, numbing myself, and kind of numbing my self-awareness and just trying to make sense of who I was strictly through what strangers told me about myself, but more specifically like the facade that I was giving them. And just reckoning with that. And then there's also this counterpart of the image, which is me deifying or idolizing this woman, and deifying love and looking at love as some kind of like magic. I'm very prone to magical thinking,
Right.
Given my upbringing and stuff. And
For people that don't know, you grew up in an evangelical Christian.
a satanic cult. But
one of those evangelical Christian
yeah.
satanic cults.
Yeah. But so me having to become a man, and the goddess having to become a woman, and where you meet in the middle,
Right.
And
is it still epic when the feet are on earth? I mean, because I think a lot of what you did here was you made an album, you made a record about love that didn't romanticize it.
Well, I've never endowed love or romance or marriage with any meaning whatsoever. Like I'm not a particularly sentimental person, which is I'm far more prone to like cynicism and whatever. And so, I mean, that's part of why this album was made with a lot of fear and trembling.
Well, and you had actually started writing some of the songs before you met the woman who's now your wife. Yes, is that true?
Yeah.
And so that must have obviously then been quite pivotal. The beginning of the relationship with her and how this actually turned out.
Yeah, I mean, Honeybear was the first tune that I wrote where, I mean, these things are happening in tandem. Like you're having these, I mean, when you're a songwriter, you are cannibalizing every experience, for a song, And so, I mean, it sounds crazy, but I mean, I sort of know if something real is happening in my life, like based on the material that I'm writing, and I was writing some really garbage material, I was writing, I mean, the highlights kind of made it onto the album, like Strange Encounter and The Night Josh Tillman Came to Our Apartment. But other than that, it was just a bunch of just garbage, just this like, there's a song called like, As Long As You've Got Yours, Believe Me, I Can Go and Get Mine. And it was just all about like, I'm this man about town, just this the cowboy stuff that's just of no real value to anyone. But that break where, and I wrote about it extensively in the exercises for listening that come with the album, this experience where, early on, like my demons and my despair and my whatever like started to emerge for the first time in our relationship, and I was despondent, over the fact that, because I was still thinking like, oh man, this is going to be the time that I can like never be, and that's a main trademark of a narcissist is like you associate being seen with shame.
Right.
Like being seen for what you are, whatever, is just, it just invokes shame and to withdraw and whatever and resent the other person, for seeing it. And that's my MO, and pretty much all my previous relationships have like ended, at that point.
Well, an ideal husband, you actually like lay out every sort of petty, garbagey vein.
That's another one where I wanted it to go from like, okay, I'm on board here, like getting drunk and high, like that's cool, like whatever. But then by the end of the song, it's like some pretty ugly shit,
Right.
like telling people jokes to shut them up, I'm happy to report that I've become less funny, over the last year or whatever, because I just don't have this same impulse,
Right.
to like draw people onto myself. But
Well, and I think the song for me was that one, I liked it so much because it wasn't the big epically awful things that people do, but
right,
kind of just like the petty asshole things that people do,
absolutely,
the things that actually,
yeah,
because in some ways there's kind of like a bravado or a swagger in the
yeah,
big epic acts that are
exactly,
awful. And this is just, here is every petty little fault I have, honey.
yeah,
Will you
exactly.
marry me?
Yeah, I mean that was quite a scene, when I showed up at like 7 a.m. I mean it happened, and even that I thought was cute, at the time, I was like so tone deaf, that I thought like,
Right,
oh, I'm making this grand gesture, like I'm
right,
showing up, I'm all
right,
bedraggled and have been out all night, but now I'm ready to whatever, and
right,
it's just horrible, it's
right.
horrifying.
Was there any, when you talked about shame and being seen in your experience prior to this relationship, the experience of actually being truly seen was one that filled you with shame. Was there ever in writing this and writing this music where you do lay things bare, and you play with it too, because I feel like you'll lay something bare and then you'll be a bit of a trickster about it and
It's an
sort of
economy.
you'll make a joke. Was there ever an impulse to protect yourself or protect your relationship? Did you ever think, my relationship with my wife is mine and I don't want it to be put out for public consumption?
That's not really my thing. Uh, I think that you drive yourself crazy trying to pretend like your life isn't going to make its way into your work, or there's just too much duality or something
Right.
like. And also, nothing else happens to inspire me, and that's the same of Emma. I mean, if you want to see like, half like a baker's dozen of half naked photos of me on the internet, I mean, that's what Emma does,
Right.
and I don't have any problem with that.
Right.
I love being somebody's muse, I want, I don't know, it's like how I make sense of the world.
Right.
And I mean, she was really, in a lot of respects, like encouraging. She just refuses to live with a bullshit artist, like literally and figuratively. Like she's not going to live with some weird, manipulative whatever, and then also she doesn't want to be with some guy who doesn't mean what he says in his
Right.
work, But I did change one line. I changed one line in Chateau Lobby that would have just been more trouble than it was worth.
Can you say what it was?
No way.
No? Okay.
No.
Okay.
But but other than that, it was all, I mean, we had an interesting dialogue about it all. And songs like Nothing Good Ever Happens at the Goddamn Thirsty Crow, which is something that, when I wrote it, I thought, oh, here's this like tough swagger tune, that's this like don't talk to my woman stuff, that's full of this like really ugly, I'm basically like a bully, this like horrible kind of like bully, and I'm literally objectifying her, like turning her, like referring to her as a blow up doll, and these things that like at the time you think are one thing, and then now I play that song and I hear that, or I hear that song, and all I hear is this like impotent rage,
Right.
and my own insecurities about my own threshold for unfaithfulness or whatever it is. It's like those things that you suspect that you're capable of, in order to deal with it, you sublimate it onto your partner, and that's, I mean, so I mean, which is all stuff that I know that she knew at the time, but she's just, I don't know, she just has this like grace and intelligence where she can like kind of control the flow of information while also like letting me just have my process.
I'm talking with Josh Tillman of Father John Misty about his new album, I Love You, Honeybear. Um, when I read somewhere in doing the research that you've talked about these songs at times being very hard to perform, that there is the emotional honesty of the songs that can be difficult. And I think about, what you just mentioned, a song where looking back at it now, you think, ugh, like here I was, I thought I was a good guy. And,
Yeah.
here I am objectifying my wife and, is it hard to revisit those emotions? Because clearly this was really raw to write this. Is that what's part of what makes it difficult to perform at times?
That's probably the same reason people like, war movies or something. I mean, no one, no one wants to go back. Wants to be like, that's a horrible. I'm gonna,
Sure.
yeah, cut that analogy short. But I don't. The first few shows that we did, I just had no idea how to gain access to the songs, and they were just really inhospitable because I just didn't know what I was doing yet. I was like, am I singing them for Emma? Am I trying to get back into this headspace? And that's a headspace I don't particularly want to go back to at all. But there's something about, when in the live context, the words and the music and all that stuff, they just become this infrastructure for this other thing to emerge, this like unspeakable thing. There's probably more truth happening in the like guttural yelps and the gyrations and stuff at that point in the
Right.
live setting than in the actual words
Right.
themselves. But it just takes a minute to get past the words. But as long as there's a flash of recognition in the audience, which I can see, then what I'm doing makes sense. Then it's hitting, somewhere, and it's not, I mean, people are there because there's something in it that is about them.
Right.
No one's that interested in me.
Right. And is that what comes back to the idea of sort of having a persona, that there is a way to kind of shelter behind it or a way to draw on it if you...
I think maybe at some point the whole thing had kind of gotten, I think on the last tour cycle, it had kind of gotten away from me
Right.
at some point but I like that. I like getting to a place where I'm just like, I don't even know where I confuse myself, That's like kind of an exciting place to inhabit. But I did a solo tour to kind of perform some ritual magic to sort of undo some of those things, like just for my own psychic health. Like I had a giant iPhone made, and it would like lower down halfway through the tour, and that was a way for me to kind of absolve myself of this, like, this person who's like on a picture,
Right.
an image,
Right.
like to sort of take power back from becoming an image so many times.
Right.
There was another point in the set where I would walk over to this wine bottle, and there would be a wine glass there, and the spotlight would follow me over, and the crowd would cheer, like, because they wanted to see me get drunk, or they wanted to see me drink, and they wanted to see me ritual, destroy myself or whatever.
Right.
And I would just pour the whole bottle of wine into the wine glass, and it would just spill over, and that was a way of dealing with that. And then at another point in the set, there was just a coat rack, and I would walk over it and just put my coat on it, and that was the way of dealing with the take it off stuff, And just these ways of like kind of, Jodorowsky talks about that sort of thing a lot, and I
Right.
really identify with these like creative ways of getting back on course. But I am a persona. I am a narrative, and I
Right.
recognize that.
Right.
I recognize that the minute I do, this thing, like I'm more or less a persona
Right.
and a narrative, and I like playing with that. But
Right.
at times it does make me spiritually sick.
Right. Right. And is that the time when you think, okay, time to stop touring, time to get back into the creative space of writing?
Yeah, I mean, I don't always do a great job of like managing it, and I think part of the artistic impulse in some ways, seeing what lies over in that space. But it's, it's give and take. But I just exist in my own mind, and
Well, and given the last thing I want to ask you before we bring the band back in here is, in terms of this current album is about how transformed and changed you were by love and having to truly be vulnerable and intimate with somebody.
yeah,
Pausing me.
maybe it was just acknowledging that that transformation was possible.
Was possible.
I'm not sure that I'm
Any
like
different?
this, and I didn't get saved or anything. You know what I mean?
Right.
But just even acknowledging, and that's the big thing, is like these polarities of Honeybear, which is like transformation is not possible. You just find someone who's miserable in the same way that you are, and you relate and you identify.
Right.
But by the time I wrote Holy Shit, to me, I couldn't believe this bizarre. I couldn't believe, I don't know, like that I had switched teams or whatever.
Right. Well, yeah. So an acknowledgement, at least, that you could drop that kind of
that there was somewhere to go.
Right.
Right. And that's another big. I mean, have you ever seen Holy Mountain? Mm-mm. It's a Jodorowsky movie, and I think that he just has this. There's just this brilliant storyline going through there where basically the spiritual journeyman or whatever ends up going off with this woman and like a little monkey. And that's where the alchemist, he's saying, he's got this other whole group of people that he's leading through all these rituals and all this stuff. But for the character that you relate to, it's like it's interesting that someone like him places such significance on companionship and it's not. I'm not talking about marriage. I'm not talking. I'm just talking about intimacy.
Right.
No matter who that is with. If that's with a child or whatever. That intimacy is, I think, the key to transformation.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of how this is being received, I know it's early days still in a way. Does that then shift the projects that come next? I mean, if this was about saying, I'm going to lay all my contradictions bare, I'm going to put it out there, I'm going to explore this new idea about the possibility of this transformative power of love, or how I could change, or how I could be seen. Now that it's out in the world and you're getting the response to it that you have, does that become another chapter in this story?
I don't know. We'll see. I mean, I'm writing a lot now, and most of what I have got written for the next album occurred like before this album came out. But yeah, I mean, I will say I'm very glad I never have to make a like anticipated follow-up ever again.
Right.
I feel like I've got some capital to burn with LP3.
Right. So it can be a bit of a letdown, maybe,
yeah,
or
exactly.
it can be
that's the narrative, right?
Right. You could just phone that one in.
Yeah.
That could just be.
I guess sophomore slump is sort of a narrative too.
Right. It could
but
be
I think 3 can definitely be the.
It's kind of when you've written your exams and sent off your scores to college, and
right.
you're just waiting, and you're
I
kind
wouldn't
of
know
like.
at that point.